Yeah.
Okay?
Do you have an account with this
No, I
system?
have to change every time I'm here.
Okay. Do you know how to do it?
No, I have to learn it every time.
You see guest username. Do you want me to log in myself? Um, but how do I? How do you want me to go to the this
Or
one,
we can, or I
right?
can, the easier way to do this.
No.
The easier way I do it all the time is I just put it on my hotspot when it's here.
Ah, okay.
Let's do that.
Because I can do this one. I can do this one. Let me see whether that works. Kateshi.
I mean, really, it can be on the hotspot.
No, I understand. Try moving closer to the wireless router. Okay, do that. I will either put mine or yours.
Let me just do my hotspot, okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Okay. CJS
I
iPhone.
can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Should be in a second. They'll load email. Oh, come on, come on. Alert. Yeah. It doesn't seem to be loading email. Here we go.
Okay, so let us just get just a few comments before our speaker starts, and I will introduce him.
Linda, I know the whole audience can hear me. I'm having trouble with my hotspot. Okay.
Okay,
My hotspot works fine. Maybe I was going to ask one of the students to come up and connect me as a guest to the.
No, not here.
You want to do it? Okay. All right. I consult for Apple. Last year, when this box was brand new, I was at Apple headquarters, right? And in a conference room at Apple headquarters, and the technology was incompatible with my brand new. I have to put this in my nose. Huh? Okay. Anyway, the room was incompatible with their own equipment. Is this upside down? Maybe that's it. What do you think? You can hear? Okay. Can you hear back there? Cool. Well, we're waiting for a technical problem, I guess. And I have a lot of good stuff to talk to you about today. I was actually inviting this young man to bring in his bicycle because I thought I might start this conversation on innovation with a bicycle. But we can imagine a bicycle, right? I'm an economist. We imagine solutions all the time. How many of you have taken economics? That's good. An unpolluted audience. How many of you are engineers? You taught us everything we sort of know, empirically, maybe. An economist joke is three people are on a desert island, right? One is a holy man, and a can of beans drifts up on shore, right? And he prays and prays and prays, and it doesn't happen, doesn't open. God doesn't open the can. And the physicist says, this is easy for me. There's a rock, here's a rock. I can open this can. And the other two say, yeah, but all the beans will be in the sand. So the economist says, well, I can open it. Oh, yeah? Yes. He said, first, let us imagine we have a can opener, okay? And that's economics, okay? So we imagine solutions. Where are you from? Here? Davis? Oh, why? Okay. All right. Pardon? It's working. Oh, fabulous. Okay.
We need to do that.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. Do that, and I will.
Okay.
HDMI laptop or VGA? Okay. Send to all displays. It does not come down.
Here, I have it in two forms. I got it. There we are. Okay. I have it right here.
Displays the screen down.
Where are you from? Yeah. China? Okay. So, can you guess originally where I'm from? No, not California. Huh? Huh? Europe? Well, that's easy. That's a layup, right? Europe's a big place. Huh? Come on, this is multiculturalism time. You're supposed to be able to look at me and figure it out. No. But not back. Back east, yes. I'm from back east, yes. Scotland's close. Ireland is part of me. Yeah. Uh-huh. Actually, I'm an Irish citizen, which makes me European. Are you going to take over? Okay. Before I take over? That was an academic coup underway right there.
Started the Global Entrepreneurship Week, which now is observed in 170 countries. So that
Next month. Next month. It'll be 173 countries. We'll kick it off, yeah. Mm-hmm. So may I start? Okay, thank you.
point is here and then here we go forward.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming. Dr. Geidt has asked me to talk about the fourth industrial revolution and how corporations are evolving and shaping to survive in the fourth industrial revolution. You hear me stuttering about that because the way I think about things is everything is interactive. So companies are going to survive and react to the fourth industrial revolution. Yeah, but companies are going to create the fourth industrial revolution. And I'm actually going to talk a lot about the texture of the industrial landscape, particularly the formation of companies and what companies will look like. Because as we think about these revolutions in technology, you can't think about them without revolutions in economics, and every economics revolution requires and yeasts organizational revolutions, which in fact change economics continuously. So I want to start, first of all, I'll put up some bona fides. Linda didn't tell you I'm also a lawyer, so we do this in an evidentiary way, okay? So there we go. That's my next book. You can't read it yet because it's not out till the 18th of January. You can buy it if anybody wants to stop for a moment. I won't be offended if you jump on Amazon, okay? It was just made for sale yesterday, so my ego isn't durable enough to check the sales numbers quite yet. But anyway, this is out from Simon & Schuster in January. Now, While we're parked here, let me just say something about this book that will give you a clue about what you're going to hear from me. This book is in the language of scientists and engineers and types of you folks, types of people. This is orthogonal. This actually goes against the canon, if you will. This basically says much of what we do to start companies, most of what we teach people on campuses about how to start companies, and I just had a young man here who I asked him his major. He said, I'm an entrepreneurship major. I said, you ought to hang around. He said, how come? I said, because I'm going to be talking to engineers and they're going to cream you, okay? This is the wrongest thing in the world to be studying if you want to start a business. Watch these engineers. They're over your shoulder. They'll start many more businesses than people being trained in the business schools. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about. This obviously is an orthogonal view of things because Davis is light in terms of entrepreneurship, but the university in which I teach, they have 12 tenured professors of entrepreneurship, if you can imagine it, right? Now, there is no canon, okay? Anything that you guys would think about as journal research or rules, right? So if some of you are structural engineers, you know when a steel beam bends under heat, right? And you know what goes into stronger beams, and you also know where, if you're doing electronic engineering, how fast photons move and how to regulate them and do switching and all that stuff. I mean, there are rules. You can predict things. They're replicable. There are no rules in entrepreneurship. The stuff that you hear all the time is sort of like, you know, something that seems to sell, and other academics seem to cook it up, but they're not empirical academics like economists like to fashion themselves. In our discipline, we all say we have physics envy, because physicists got real data and they got real rules, and we try real hard to do tons and tons of like regression analysis so that when we say something, people say, yeah, that seems okay. And mind you, I should say one other thing as you evaluate what I say to you, economists are very tricky characters, okay? We hold power, huge power, political power, way beyond what any empirical standard should permit. I like to, at moments like this, if there's like a psychologist in the room or somebody from social work or somebody like sociology, right? You ask him, does the President of the United States have a psychological advisor? He might need one now, but okay, but most of them do. No, but there's been an economic advisor by law since 1947, right? The Council of Economic Advisors. That's big-scale economists who are constantly whispering in the president's ear about what to do to keep the economy alive, to avoid recessions, or most importantly, which very few people pay attention to, is getting growth underway. And you'll hear a lot of that these days about trying to make the economy grow at 3% or 4%. And I'll touch a little bit about that because for the last 10 years, we've had a very slow growth economy. It's been growing a little less than 2%. For most of you, that's sort of like the beginnings of your adult life. So I would point out that for most of you, there are a few exceptions here, you've never lived through a booming economy. The reason some of your pals in other lesser disciplines are living in their parents' basement is because there aren't enough jobs. And one of the reasons there are all these accelerators and incubators is because there's not enough places to absorb talented graduates. And one reason everybody's out there trying to think about maybe they should work in or start an NGO, a misnomer if ever there was, all non-government organizations are really government organizations, okay, is because there aren't enough jobs in the for-profit sector. So the trick here is how do we get this economy going again? And we're going to talk about that in the context of this lecture. So anyway, that's one book I wrote. Okay, the most recent one. These are earlier books. This is the one that will probably be bearing most influence on the conversation I have here. But just to finish off, you guys don't understand if you're in the sciences and in engineering. There are people who walk around with academic patina who come from fields where there's almost nothing to know. Now, they may have PhDs, right? But they don't really know stuff. They don't even have implicit knowledge. Many professors of entrepreneurship never started a business. That's what I mean by implicit knowledge. You know, if you were going off to study surgery, you don't go study with surgery surgery with somebody who's never operated on anyone. And before somebody gets to be a professor in a renowned engineering school, there has to be evidence that this person did something by way of solving a real live engineering problem. So they contributed to the canon, they understand the canon, they're committed to rule finding and to adhering to rules, and also for the searching of where there are holes in the rules and where paradigms should break apart. So enough of that in terms of the skepticism I want to inject in here. I want to get right into the meat of what I want to talk about. And I'm going to talk about the fourth industrial revolution. And the first thing we're going to talk about is, what is the fourth industrial revolution? Everybody can name the first three, right? The first is steam. So we could displace human effort with steam effort. By the way, one of the reasons I should pause here, even as I say steam, because I suspect through some of your imaginations right now, you say, oh boy, it's a good thing we got away from that industrial revolution. You can just imagine Scotland, where you imagined me, okay, where it all starts, and you know, the Vales are belching smoke, right, and the economy, the environment is suddenly being degraded, right, and then we see the consolidation of labor and really the beginnings of our cities. So before the first industrial revolution, most of the world's population was very rural. So this interconnectedness between technological development and industrial development and economic development brings unforeseen consequences constantly. So our vision of the first industrial revolution is often not seen by people as also the birthing of huge industrial cities. Our notion of an urban slum is hard to find referenced in literature before 1800. Urban places aren't that big, and people aren't sure, you know, the people who write history are wealthy. There's no focus on the poor in slums, and the poor always have an exit. They can go back to the farm, and most people don't even enter because there's no jobs. That's not what cities are about. They're places of trade. All right? Now, so the second industrial revolution, by the way, since I've already talked about dampened growth, 2% growth over the last decade, some of you have probably been brainwashed a little bit. So you may not know this. This just may be a meme that resides in the back of your head. And you're saying, well, you know, maybe 2% growth's not so bad. I keep reading it's the new normal. And you've never lived through 3 or 4% growth. And the meme that floats in the back of your head is, you know, if we had 3 or 4% growth, we'd have lots more pollution, wouldn't we? So for every jump up in industrial production, we get a degrading of the environment. And of course, as engineers, you should be rejecting that couplet, saying that part of your job is you can actually produce more with cleaner fuel. And we're doing it all the time. And the evidence is every place that we've been thinking about this for a long time. Some of you in the audience might have remembered, you're old enough to have remembered the pollution in some major American cities, in particular Los Angeles. That's all gone. Somebody invented a catalytic converter, and we got clean air, or the appearance of clean air. The cost, of course, which a lot of people who argue against growth is that when we have growth, everybody gets wealthier. Human welfare expands. The only way we know how to expand human welfare is through growth. So any of you who really study healthcare or public health, we've known since 1947, when Henry Segrist wrote this book, that if you look historically from 1947 back to where he could compile some kind of records, the single most influential variable in changing health status is not doctors or hospitals or medical breakthroughs or surgical inventions. The single most powerful predicting variable is disposable personal income. As incomes go up, people buy better food, they house themselves better, they buy education at the edges with their marginal income, and they dress better. And they get educated, as I said before. So here are the seeds of this evolutionary sense of 4 revolutions. The first one we can identify very easily. That's the steam revolution. And the second is generally thought to be the electrical revolution, where we in fact invent off of the steam, we create electricity, a kind of a new way of capturing energy. We can move it around, and it begins to change everything. And in fact, one of the things we early connect is that electricity is suddenly going to actually change productivity. So we know steam changes productivity. We can do stuff, we can make more stuff with fewer people. We may have to throw a lot more firewood and coal into machines. But the net of it all is humankind, those benefiting and working around the Industrial Revolution, are in fact benefiting because of the productivity gains, which are remarkable. And then, of course, along comes our discovery of how to harness electricity, how to generate electricity, how to transmit electricity, and then how to harness it. So we can think about this in your lives as engineers. Some of you have seen pictures of factories. And old-time factories were either next to mills or they had a huge, huge boiler next to them and a gigantic steam piston. And that was driving energy up through shafts and axles to the roofs of factories. And from those roofs were huge pulleys and leather belts that came down to the workbenches. That's how the first Ford Motor Company was structured. And all that energy was being transmitted. Imagine the waste of energy down to drill presses, lathes, and so forth as they made engine blocks and formed chassis and made wheels, right? And electricity changed all that because we could move the motor to the place at which the work had to be done. And in fact, we moved the motor often into, the thing you should conceive of in your mind here is we made hand drills with an electric motor in them, zoom, right? This is invented by a little teeny company in Syracuse called Porter Cable. And they had this great entrepreneurial idea of putting the motor on the drill. That's how it starts. We'll come back to Syracuse 2 other times. And part of what we're talking about here is you can never predict where these revolutions are going to be. And the way you predict these things is where are smart people? And the history is, I see you smirking, right? And I teach there. And you're right to smirk, because there aren't that many smart people. I can say that because I'm 3,000 miles away, okay? But in 1950, it was a completely different story. And in 1920, it was a completely different story when Henry Ford went there to buy his first transmissions. And why does he go there? Because it's America's first big gear city. It's his first gear city because the Sanderson brothers come from England to build a hard steel mill, anticipating the American Industrial Revolution of a much greater scale, and they're going to be in on it, and they build the first hard steel mill in America there, which also helps to explain why the typewriter is made there, okay, and why gearboxes are made there. And for a long time, General Motors and Chrysler and Ford are going there for their transmissions, right? 2 other things just so I don't forget. Syracuse is also a city that commits suicide. Anybody ever been upstate New York? Right? What is upstate New York like starting about now? It's horrible, right? 154 inches of snow on average, right? Everybody has tons of salt so they can get out of their house and melt the ice, right? Some people actually have snowshoes. A lot of beer in the cellar, right? They mark the calendars for April if they're lucky, right? And in the midst of all this, how this ever happens, no one will know. A Carrier Corporation comes up, grows up, and they make air conditioning. And the minute they make air conditioning, and we'll see this in a minute, America's population starts to move around. It helps we have a jet that's making us cheaper. It helps that we're making free communications. So suddenly kids who lived in Rochester or Toledo or Erie could move to San Francisco because they could talk to mom for free. It only cost them $100 to take the plane. And they could move to Florida because there was air conditioning, right? And incidentally, by the way, America was preconditioned for this move during the 1950s. We invented television, and if you watch television, when I was a kid in the 1950s, the only place they made television shows that were of interest, like Leave It to Beaver, was California. I didn't know what California was, but I sure wanted to live there, right? Because at Christmas time, the kids were playing in the street in roller skates, right? And yeah, they had a Christmas tree. I don't know where that came from, but it had nothing to do with anything. But there was no snow. This looked good to me and lots of other people, right? So we see these huge dynamics of how the American population moves. New York, when I grew up, was the first most populous state, the richest state. It's now the fourth most populous state. Florida's in front of it. California is way in front of it, several multiples larger, okay? This is all what happens when people move, ideas move, and technology permits this moving. So now we're in the second industrial revolution, which is electric. The third industrial revolution, where I think we probably still are, but we're here to speculate, is what's called the information revolution. I rather like to think about innovation rather differently. I think there are sort of four forces that drive innovation, and they drive it through these periods, whatever the revolution is called. These are deeply seated in humankind. We innovate because we're humans, and as humans, all of us are wired to do four things, all of which require new solutions. They require invention. The first is we have to defend ourselves. Okay, we may all look differently, one from the other, but hot flash, whether we're burning statues or taking statues down or burning flags or what have you, we're in the American tribe. And that American tribe has walls on it because there's lots of rules inside, and these are rules that are important to making the tribe work. And one of them, of course, should be well known to everybody. It's personal freedom. That's the fundamental of this tribe. And to keep the tribe intact and to keep that personal freedom and personal dignity intact, we have to have defense. Now, you don't have to have our values to have defense. You know, there's somebody sort of north of South Korea who has a vision of defense that's a little different than ours, but it's still the same motive. We don't want anybody coming over the wall to get our tribe. So the first impulse is tribal, and it's protection of the tribe. And you might think about converting this into real life, right? Where does America spend a huge amount of its innovation dollars? It's in defense. We think of defense as a public good. We pay for it through the public budget. There are places like DARPA that think up radical new stuff way out on the frontiers. The reason they exist is DARPA exists because we can't really be sure that we won't be surprised by somebody on the outside. So this is sort of anti-surprise spending, but in the course of it, we do lots of other stuff. And all of us are beneficiaries of that. You may hate militarism, you may be a conscientious objector, you may disparage American foreign policy or domestic policy, but you're the beneficiaries of all this spending no matter what, because it spills over in enormous ways. The first tangible evidence of that closest to you is some of you are bored with me and are already on the internet, which is clearly, it exists because we wanted to protect our missile defense systems and we wanted to move information faster among people who needed information to do more innovation. The second thing wired in our human souls, basically, is we don't want to die, right? No matter what your religious position, right? Nobody's really sure what's next. And so long as we got science that basically says we can keep the suspense at bay for a couple more years, right? Or I can have a better life, we can conquer morbidity and we can conquer disability. We spend money on medicine. And how do we spend money on medicine? He says taxes down here. It's a public good. Lots of it is public good. We have the National Institutes of Health, and some of you may aspire to be NIH or, let's say, Howard Hughes fellows or something, or you may be aspiring to get a PhD or an MD PhD in bioengineering at some great place like UCSF or Berkeley or Johns Hopkins or Harvard or Baylor or MD Anderson or UCLA. We have lots of places where we're doing extraordinary science. And it's all about trying to keep our species cooking, specific individuals in our species cooking, and improving one of the measures we have of improving our economic welfare, our state welfare, our individual welfare is longer life. You know, if I take a show of hands here, who wants shorter life? Well, that was a pretty quick universal vote, okay? Third thing that runs through all this is another human impulse, and it's speed. And this is where these things start to cross over, but it's speed. We all want to do everything faster. The reason you don't go to the library anymore is because you can speedily get every piece of information that it used to take hours to go shop for on the internet. Isn't that great? There's evidence that we wanted speed. We wanted speed of access. And think about it. How do we advertise access to the internet, right? Companies argue about, they advertise speed, which may register with you. I can't even imagine my internet connections going faster. But you download, you know, the Secrets of the Atom Bomb, so you want them like in a nanosecond as opposed to me getting them in 4 nanoseconds, right? So people are pushing speed constantly. Think about this. When I asked you if you would bring in your bicycle, and it's a good place to talk about it because Davis has a bicycle on the city seal and bicycles are on all the shopping bags, right? Think of the bicycle. We created it in 1804. We couldn't have done it without hardened steel. It becomes ubiquitous. It speeds us, and where are we speeding? We speed all the time for new knowledge. So the bicycle, if you can imagine this, helps you in your village go see another village because you can go 4x or 5x the speed of walking, maybe 10x the speed of walking, and suddenly your horizon is expanded. And suddenly when we got that in front of us, we have imagined that we can go faster than horses or feet will take us. Whole new doors open. It's just like opening the car, which of course is a direct descendant of the bicycle. Now what's the connection? The connection is we want to go places speedy, and we want to do this individually, and this is what the bicycle starts to whisper to us. And of course, within 100 years of the bicycle, again, there's a speed dimension to my story. Within 100 years of the bicycle, all those parts are being assembled by the Wright brothers, and we're flying. Think of this. The speed of innovation is part of this, and we haven't overcome it. And I'll talk about this in a minute because there are economists around who are saying, well, the speed of innovation is slowing because we've innovated everything we need as a species, right? You're laughing, but think about that. This is one of the questions that entrepreneurs without a great idea put to themselves, right? I look around me, what do we need? You know, I see this all the time because I judge business plan contests. And most of the stuff that student entrepreneurs come up with, they think there's a desperate need for this, you know? Pizza delivery with a cell phone app, or one of my favorites, which I've only seen about 5,000 times now, is a frying pan that you can control with your cell phone, right? And when the eggs are done, beep, right? This is the most complicated way to fry an egg developed by all humankind. But it's an attempt to sort of say there's a revolutionary way to do stuff, right? Make it faster. You can't cook the egg any faster, but you can get more information in the perfect egg this way. All right, the last thing that we think about in terms of innovation, it might not occur to you, but this has been with us since the very beginning of time, and that is entertainment. And entertainment, our taste for entertainment and innovation in entertainment grows and grows as all these other areas grow as well. We're going to live longer. We're going to have a higher demand for entertainment. We're getting more sophisticated because of all this. We have to keep innovating in entertainment. And if you think about this, in your short lifetimes, you've seen revolutions in how you buy music, take music, think of music, how people compose music, television. Netflix didn't exist when you were in the cradle. Okay? We're watching the whole marketplace change, and that's really an important thing in terms of how we think about this topic from an economics perspective, which is where we're going to move right now. So I'm going to show you something here, and again, I'm going to beg you to be orthogonal. So the minute you see a chart like this, particularly if it's been printed, you say, yeah, okay, that's going to imprint my brain, and now I understand. Okay? For a long, long time, this chart has prevailed as a view about how innovation happens. Okay? It starts with a big bang, and it's an eruption. And you know, like everybody else, innovation theorists and economists try to label stuff so it looks like they're really smart. So you don't use the word, you know, eruption a lot if you're not a volcanic scientist, right? In daily language, when you're talking with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you're not talking about eruption. You remember that when you had pimples, but not now, okay? Okay, and then there's a frenzy, right? And then synergy, and then maturity. Well, the person who put this chart together, and then, of course, the next grade surge, this person held enormous sway. Now, think about this. Think real hard about it. Oh, I don't know what I did there. Okay, there, we're back. Okay. The person who did this chart had enormous sway strategically. This governed IBM's view of the world for almost 20 years. One by the name of Perez put this chart together, and she was an adjunct. She was welded onto the hip of all of the people at IBM. And think about this. There's a time dimension to this, and she basically says, from one end of the curve to the next, it's generally looking back through history. Now, how much history we have? Think about innovation starting with the steam engine or maybe the bicycle. So how many cycles of this do we have? Ain't that many. But she concluded it takes 20 years between the eruption of something and the point at which it is actually insinuated into the society. So think about semiconductors and the creation of the mainframe, and then laptop computers and software, okay, and we're sort of getting less and less excited about the ensuing levels of innovation. It's going to take us 20 years before we're kind of bored and a new eruption breaks through. Now, I'm going to make this a little interactive. Does this hold water for you? You. There's nobody else around you. What's your first name? Ahmed. Okay, now there's no mistaking. I'm asking Ahmed. You hear this, everybody? Does this hold water for you? No? How come? Does this 20-year cycle from start to finish hold water? This is IBM. Let me translate this for you, right? IBM says, oh yeah, computers, fantastic, semiconductors, we were there first. We were actually building these things with vacuum tubes, and then we got on the train, and bang. And what are you telling us, Ms. Perez? What I'm telling you is you got to milk this out because there's nothing big's going to happen for another 20 years. You got it? Okay? That's industrial progress as I see it. Now you're running IBM, right? Your chief executive. 4 have come and gone in those 20 years buying this theory. Does this theory ring true to anybody? Why not? Yeah, well, it might be right, but we don't know, really. Why do you say it's wrong?
It just seems like the innovation can happen for a longer period.
Yeah.
There's no reason for it to have, for wait 20 years for something to reach maturity. Smartphones kind of exploded in 2017.
We're going to see some of that, right? But think about this. Now, what this does is open a door for you to think about time in history. And I'll come back to this when I conclude, but think about this in time in history. The Industrial Revolution happens about the time of the American Republic starting, okay? Not really. We sort of anticipate, our Constitution actually anticipates the Industrial Revolution. It's an extraordinary document. It has the patent clause in there. What is that about? America starts with a vision. The property is not just real property. It's not just personality. That's your belt and your furniture. But it's also your ideas. So this represents the triumph of Alexander Hamilton and Benjamin Franklin over Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson wants medieval America. Everybody lives in a farm, little teeny villages. And these guys say, wait a minute. You bring all those people from Europe and you give them total freedom, and there's no king around saying you owe me money and I will make your determinations for them. Human beings will go crazy in terms of their creativity, and we're going to actually stimulate it by willing to anticipate making ideas into protectable property. Okay? So now we got the Industrial Revolution happens. Okay, how big is the company? How big do companies look like before the Civil War? You know, some of you, when I say, okay, you're going to work at General Motors, you think, yeah, I'll work at General Motors. And implicit, the meme that floats through your head is General Motors has always been a giant company. Maybe it was started about the time of the Vatican or something, you know, and they built the buildings in Detroit, which has been around since, you know, 1400. And, right, I used to consult at Ford, and I'd sit in the main cafeteria, the big building in Dearborn, and I'd say to all these MBAs, hey, tell me about what you think the first days of Ford were like. Well, then there were 600,000 people working there, and these people had MBAs. They'd gone through their MBA training without ever even thinking about how the company came to exist. It's all been 600,000 people. Maybe in the war it was almost 1 million, right? The scale dimension and the time dimension doesn't calculate. Now this is really important, particularly to where we're going to go in the back end, but we don't understand the evolution of these corporations make this industrial revolution happen. And we're trying, in this case with Perez, to go back and impose a theory of innovation that helps explain the future growth of a corporation using a hypothesis about how technology moves. So the point of this is, if you're buying into this and you become president here, this is really great, but you still don't have to run a lot of research because nothing big's going to happen out here till out here. Or you better start doing your research, but you know you're on this very comfortable 20-year cycle. And by the way, what happened with IBM? Anybody know this? IBM had a near-death experience. They were out there selling mainframe computers, right? And some people close by here, accidentally close by here, very accidentally close by here, begin to think that there's no reason to have those huge things. And somebody has a little German idea that says, computers should be at home. IBM thought they were laughing over their 20-year plan. Computers at home? No. You got to have refrigerated rooms. You got to have false floors. You got to have huge steel frames to hold all this stuff. Big wires, switches. Whoa. This ain't going to home. It's not a refrigerator. Maybe if you put something big as a refrigerator in there, you could have a computer at home. But okay. The point is, somebody breaks history with a vision. You know about this paradigm shifting, right? It's not a paradigm shift in this case. They weren't testing the old rules. They had a completely different vision of what all this computing power could be. And this, of course, introduces us to what is the third industrial revolution, and it becomes, roughly we speak of it as a digital revolution. It's an information revolution. And you know this better than I do, because, you know, I think I'm listening to music, and some of you are hearing how the digits are composed, broken apart, transmitted, put back together to make a sensate experience for me, and I just think music. So people like me hear a piano sonata on my computer, and I'm thinking about the technology of the piano, right? I see the wooden piano and the ivory keys and the percussion striking them and how it's supposed to sound. And some of you don't see it at all. You don't even envision the piano. You're watching how those digits are taken out, composed, repackaged more efficiently, better fidelity, all kinds of stuff. And what that does, of course, is open a window to us about how we all see the world differently. And it's those differences wherein we watch innovation happen. So, are we at the end of innovation? Is there a fourth revolution? That's my question. Maybe. Many more to come. Okay? Anybody else got an opinion on this? By the way, I'll come back in a second, Ahmed, because you said many. Now I'm going to call your bluff and ask you to describe the next one. Okay? Or you can skip the next one and go out two. Okay? What do you think? Artificial intelligence? And you can differentiate that from the digital revolution.
Yes, up to a certain point, but it's not a step jump, it's more continuous.
Yeah.
You can't really segregate boundaries, they diffuse into one another.
Yeah, I think that, by the way, describes all of these revolutions. You know, we didn't have steam, we couldn't have built power generators, so we could have never pulled the wire down to the motor here. Okay, I think one feeds the next, so let's stipulate that, right? So you think the next one will be artificial intelligence, and by that you would include self-driving cars?
Yes, and it's already hit us.
Yeah.
I've already seen automation.
Sure, yeah, you can go to a plant and watch a completely computerized robotic plant, right? You can watch an ATM machine being built at Diebold, right? There's not a single soul on the floor. Moving huge, hard steel plates, everything, instantly. Yeah.
But we measure the revolution in the basis of technology. How about as a social, mental social changes? Provide some more, a better differentiation.
Aren't you an engineer? Why do you care about that stuff? Huh? Right? Seriously. I mean, you know, I'm enough of an engineer economist to say what we're talking about are the drivers that will change all that social stuff, right? But as Linda says, this is a two-way street. It's reciprocal. Our visions of where we want to go with life will, in fact, shift back to what we're going to focus on. Take, for example, this question of a declaration. Really, it's a political declaration. It is a high-scale, capital P, political declaration. You know, we're going to have a sustainable environment. I don't know what that means, neither do you. You know about it because you study things that fly under the flag of making the environment sustainable, or making a building sustainable, or making a house sustainable, or making a farmer's acreage sustainable. But somehow it relates back to a declaration now made politically, and I'm going to get into this in a bit, because we're going to talk a little bit about blockchain and why blockchain has consequences for government. I mean, for government written big, like big G government. What I'm talking about is human governance. Okay, so yes, there's a lot of give and take, reciprocating back and forth. By the way, how much time do I have? 5 minutes? Oh man, I'm not even going to be able to describe denouement, okay, which is the fourth industrial revolution and what it does in terms of how companies look. So let me see what the next slides are, right? And this shows you adaptation, how quickly it happens, and we are, in fact, speed is coming along, and even I'm speeding, zoom, zoom, right? Look quick. Air conditioning went up like crazy. You know, it was accepted fast. Electricity took a little time. Telephone took some time. I don't know if the toaster's up there. America took a long time getting to the toaster. But microwave happened in about 4 years, and it had unforeseen consequences. What's the big unforeseen consequences of microwave technology? America becomes obese very quickly. Seriously, correlation with a microwave is almost unitary, okay? Ah, ha, ha, this is the one I can't show you because this tells you whether or not you get a job because of all this, right? But Linda, I'll put all this up so people can go find the sources, okay? And the last slide I want to get to is my favorite slide because it's my research. And what it basically says is, in the midst of all this, how come we're having fewer firms form? And the evidence is very clear. We now have about 6,000 professors of entrepreneurship. The more of them we deploy, the fewer new firms start. We now have incubators every place. They seem to be Death Stars for entrepreneurship, right? Venture capital ain't making any difference. Something's going on here. Now, some people might say, ooh, not enough good ideas. I don't buy that. And neither should you. Because I suspect, I would agree with you, these new generations of industrial cycles are going to go faster and faster and faster and faster. So people who think, wow, we got everything we ever possibly could have now, life is really great, and I'm going to be stumped coming up with something better, ain't going to be the case. okay? Because among other things, you're at a great research university, and the premise of great research universities is nothing's settled, everything is in motion. Everything that has been done in the past sits there to be leveraged to make the new. How could I end better than that? Okay. We got 2 minutes left. Questions?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So one of the things that people are talking about before disaster is how it's going to change the way people work. Because if you have all of these robots that are going to take people in manufacturing lines and
Yeah.
making all of these things, and then what people will do after that? So this replacement is going to change the way
We don't know. Period.
but it can be very, very difficult, and it can displace a lot of things.
It could, but it could turn out that even with the robotics revolution, I'm going to bet we have higher levels of labor demand. People are going to invent new stuff to do.
But that implies that education, higher education is going to move lower and lower, because you cannot have people who have only a high school diploma to get involved in jobs that need something more advanced. And people don't move in that,
Yeah, I think one of the great challenges that's up ahead is we're going to discover it. So the evidence is overwhelming right now. We could very well have the 5th, Ahmed, you listen to this, we could have the 5th industrial revolution. It could be the education industrial revolution, where we basically say, boy, it really takes a long time for people to internalize the knowledge they have to contribute, right? Right? Look how inefficient it is for me to stand up here and talk to you. This drives me nuts, okay? I can learn faster reading and doing my other stuff. On the other hand, it's one of the reasons I talk like I do, because I'm trying to suck you into new ways of thinking, and some professors can't because they aren't synthetic and they don't do all this type of thinking at the edge, right? So I think it's important to do this once in a while. But my own experience going through colleges and going through law school, I never went to law school. What an insufferable way to waste time when it was all in books, right? And if you ever heard a law professor drone on, I go home and watch baseball games because it'd be much more entertaining and much more fun. And I would recruit you to go do stuff like that if you got professors who you just can't learn from because the act is so horrible. This is a very, very tricky way to convey information. In fact, all I'm doing here is 2 things. I'll end with 2 quotations from W.B. Yeats, my favorite poem. Okay? Measurement began our might. And you've all internalized that. And we haven't begun to measure stuff. We haven't begun to measure stuff. That's the first thing. And the second thing is Yeats said, the job of a teacher is not to fill buckets. It's to light fires. Okay, so all I hope I did here is throw a lot of kindling around your imaginations, okay? Say there's a lot of structural stuff out there that needs to be overthrown. We are, in fact, captured in history, but our job is to make history and to make it in different ways. Thank you.